these Chinese pastors, you're talking to them, and you ask them a question, what can I do for you? And they responded, they said, we have 400 families that are financially in need. Tell that really quick.
Well, in that movement, I could clearly document by breaking down their leadership and stuff. And one of the ways that God has made me is I connect the dots. I haven't always listened well, but I've been taught to listen well. And the 10 million people in house churches in that movement, I think, is a really solid figure. And so so what would happen that I didn't expect, I would listen to them for 10 to 14 hours a day. And then they'd want me to teach the Bible word for word, chapter by chapter, because they had so few Bibles. So I would teach through Luke or something every night for 2 or 3 hours. And so we got to know each other fairly well. But I knew from being in Africa, that was the wrong question. When they were doing sort of Q&A, and it was, things were going along well. And I needed to ask them, how can we learn from you and how can we partner with you? But I used a more money question. How can we help you? And they talked about their 400 pastors, deacons, and elders in prisons across that country, and that their families were suffering, and this, that, and the other. And it just went through my mind. Okay, this is God. This is why you made me. You know, this is early on in this persecution journey. This is why you made me. I got a big mouth. I can tell stories. I'll go back and I'll outdo anybody, but we will raise money to help the persecuted church. And God would not allow me to speak. It was terrifying. I could not open my mouth. I couldn't speak. I thought, you know, I've read stories, and I've always been dumb, but now I can't speak. And I just finally just had enough common sense with them looking at me like, what's going on with this guy? It wouldn't have taken long to where they'd come up there and laid hands on me to get out whatever got into me. But I said, Lord, speak, your servant wants to hear. And God said, say this. I said, I can't say this. He said, I'm not giving you a choice. Thus saith the Lord. I said to them, how many of you are in this movement? They said, we've already told you. There's over right out of 10 million. I said, hear the words of God. If 10 million of you can't take care of 400, just 400 families, do we have the right to call ourselves followers of Jesus or the Church of Jesus Christ? And I thought, well, I don't know where I am in that place. I laid down in the back of a van, taxi type of thing for 18 hours, which is totally against my personality. And I didn't know where I was in that whole country. And I said, I've offended everybody I know. And they're just I'm done. And this lady began to cry. And another lady began to weep. And they began to hold themselves and pull their hair and began to cry out to God for forgiveness. And they just begged God for forgiveness. And after this went on for 30, 40 minutes, with me just sitting there watching it, the leader got up, one of the leaders got up and wiped the dusty tears off his face. And he said, you're going to go home. And we want you to tell the story of our faith. You don't have to tell the stories of our financial need. He said, if 10 million of us can't care for just 400 families, we have no right to call ourselves followers of Jesus or the Church of Jesus Christ. Ripken, you go home and you do your job and let us do our job. And convicting? What word do I use? You see, I don't want to come home and beat up on the bride of Christ any more than I want somebody to beat my bride up. It's a bride of Jesus here in America. But that's why I want her to be faithful. I want her to love her husband, the bridegroom. I want her to soar. I want her to have a spiritual marriage that is just beyond human words. I don't want to reduce that to a denominational, doctrinal position. Those of course important. I want it to be a vibrant place where believers come together and then take Jesus to the marketplace. And then that bride comes back together and celebrates with new parts of that family of what Jesus has done, the 6 days of those that they've been apart, perhaps. But you and I are probably making the cardinal mistake, is that the center of worship for the kingdom of God in the Bible and in the world today is in the home. We're fighting over who leads the church. The biggest deficit we have in Christianity in America is the lack of men leading their families in worship in their home. That is the center of worship in Christianity in the world today and always has been. And I often think, and I'm not opening up a can of worms, but if I give my children over to any godly clergy to lead them to Christ, to baptize them, to disciple them, then what I've done is given up my spiritual leadership of my family to someone else, and I've allowed them to take away from me the joy of leading my kids to Christ, baptizing them, and gathering them in my home for worship. And then as we join the broader body and do even greater things that we couldn't do as a family. When you farm your children out to someone else to lead them spiritually, you've abdicated your role as God's person in that home.